Hi, everybody, and welcome to Meet the Founders, our monthly webinar where we get in depth with some of the people that we've hosted on Innovation Insights, or it might be somebody completely new. And what we're trying to do is get a better glimpse of the founding challenges, solutions, some of the adaptive things that we've had to do to make things work in our business. And our business is bringing innovation to market. Today, I'm going to be joined by Sydney Robinson and Leo Barbe. Sydney is with Vessl Prosthetics, and Leo is with Tugi Care. They're two Canadian startups who are navigating those tricky waters between Canada and the USA, which are getting trickier all the time, it seems. And it should be pretty interesting having this conversation today in light of everything that's going on in the macro world. Sydney, ladies first, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, just for people who have not seen the Innovation Insights broadcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jay, for having me. I really appreciate it. Excited to be here with Leo. So my background is engineering. I started Vessl Prosthetics as the CEO and co-founder back in 2022 after my education in mechanical and biomedical engineering, and then actually from shadowing a doctor at a diabetes clinic. Happy to get into this a little bit later, but for those of you that don't know, diabetes is the leading cause of leg amputation. And so when we were shadowing this doctor, we noticed how frustrating it can be when patients' limbs are changing size inside of a prosthetic leg that does not change size. And so what we've created at Vessl is an adaptive solution. We've created a way for the prosthetic socket to automatically adapt as the leg is changing size throughout the day. And this improves comfort and usability of the prosthesis itself.
Question, how did you come up with this idea? I mean, was it some lived experience or working in a certain area?
Yeah, honestly, it was really just through talking to as many patients, prosthetists, and other care providers as we could. So we started by speaking with prosthetists because they're the ones who are actually making prosthetic legs. And so they're on kind of the fabrication side. And they're the ones that are constantly dealing with patients. We spoke to the patients for their lived experience. And then we spoke to all of the care providers that are around those two individuals. So that could be family caregivers, that could be nurses, surgeons, physiotherapists. And when we were speaking with all of those individuals, we got a really solid picture of what the core problem is, a dynamic leg inside of a static socket. So that core problem, but also a really clear picture of what all of the different use cases were and the different kind of parameters around that problem that we would need to design within as an innovator. And so that was really how we got started. And the more we spoke with these individuals, the clearer that picture became. And that was how we started with our product that we have today.
Great. And Leo, I know yours is through a lived experience, almost a death experience. Could you tell us a little bit about how Tugi Care got started and your experience that led you to coming up with this idea?
Yeah, definitely, Jay. Thanks again for having us here. What we're doing at Tugi Care is empowering and supporting caregivers and those they care for. I've lived both sides of the caregiving journey. When I was 21, I was shot and left for dead, and I watched my family care for me. Both my mom and my dad were given their dream jobs at the same moment of my accident. And within a year, both had lost their jobs. Taking care of me was more important than their job. But obviously, the jobs were like, if you're not going to come to work, we can't continue to employ you. So that was my first taste of this caregiving, the idea of taking care of someone you love, but not being a paid caregiver. What happens then? And then, fast forward after 17 years of being an entrepreneur, built businesses in education and entertainment, and now in healthcare, digital healthcare, helping caregivers with watching not only my mom care for my stepdad, but also myself now becoming a caregiver for my parents and watching the burden, the strain, the emotions, the anxiety, the guilt, the care navigation, the constantly worrying about if you're doing a good job or if you're not there, you're not always within close distance to your family. So that's lived experience is exactly what pushed me to build Tugi. And what we've built is Lane, she is the first emotionally intelligent care companion, navigator of care, and also remote patient monitor. So she connects to smartwatches and devices to help with digital presence. How do you support someone when you can't physically be there? We're looking to build that tool, but also for the seniors, the individuals they care for also need support. in different healthcare systems. So Lane is able to help the caregiver and the care recipient as well.
What I love about both of your companies is that you're really focusing on a core problem that has not been addressed sufficiently. So congratulations to both of you on that. Now, let's talk about innovating in Canada, because I'm obviously here in the US. I'm in Southern California. I work with the Angel Capital Association. And obviously, there's a lot of investment capital in the US, and there is a lot of opportunity in Canada for startups. I know you've got all kinds of wonderful programs that we could only dream about, like SRNED, IRAP, non-dilutive money that, we just can't access. So that's great for getting started. What do you see as you're going forward? What I understand is the latter kind of stops out around Series A and you start looking in the US for capital. Is that correct, or am I totally off base?
No, I would say that that's pretty accurate. I think that a lot of companies in Canada, especially in the medtech space, which Leo and I both are, I think we know in advance that coming to the US for investment is what we're going to have to do. And I think a lot of us actually start earlier. So we've fundraised for our pre-seed round in the United States and in Canada. And we're lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to receive investment from both countries. But I do think it's important to start building those relationships early on so that folks can see you build, see you execute on your milestones, so that they would like to be involved at that seed, Series A, and later stages as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in Canada, it's hard to take risks as an investor. The government doesn't necessarily reward you for taking risks, where maybe in the US there's a bit more of a reward there. So to support that, the government steps in and provides a lot of grants, a lot of supportive non-dilutive grants that can be quite powerful to businesses here in Canada. But there is a limit, and and there's a lot of parameters to get involved in those grants. So although they're great, they're not, an easy shot all the time. So, I think the biggest thing is focusing on traction, focusing on your users, making sure that you're getting a lot of traction with users, with customers before going after some of those grants. And it can really help speed up the process. I think a lot of time like Sydney was saying, it's good to start early, but you really got to focus on customer attraction when you're working here in Canada, especially in AI. And it's all about distribution and traction, which are great to have, but difficult, as there's, creating product and creating solutions now is easier. Is that what they're saying? Doesn't feel that way all the time. That's what they tell us. You can vibe code an app in a weekend.
Yep.
Sure you can. Is that app going to actually function properly? That's a whole other story. So I think it's great. I think, the benefit of non-dilutive grants is great, but that willingness to take risks in the US is something that pulls a lot of us Canadians over the border. Because, Sydney and I are taking risks, and we need individuals to support us that see the value in taking risks as well.
Let's talk about one of the challenges. If you're coming into the US looking for capital, a lot of times there are challenges to that. Like, I know I've talked with a lot of my fellow angel investors, and they're like, well, unless they have a US entity, I'm not going to invest. Do you feel any pressure to create a US entity for US investors, or how does that work?
Yeah. I don't know, Leo, if that was your experience, but it was, the second question that people would ask when I was pitching for investment was, I don't know, they would pick something in the pitch to ask. And then the second question would be, and are you a US entity or will you have one? And certainly it was a decision that I came back to, I would say every couple of months throughout the fundraising process. That first time I would reevaluate and say, okay, now does it make strategic sense? Now does it make strategic sense? Now does it make strategic sense? But what you had mentioned at the beginning, the access to non-dilutive capital here in Canada is phenomenal. And so by remaining a Canadian entity, we can make good use of all of that non-dilutive capital, be a very fiscally responsible company. And that makes investment dollars, regardless of where they come from, go a lot further. So I think being able to articulate that story resonated really well with investors. They tended to understand where we were coming from and really value that. At least the people that came on certainly saw that.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like Sydney was saying, being a Canadian entity helps us with these dilutive grants. And our hope is that, American-based investors see that, like, our dollar goes further when they're in the US because they can action those grants. Some investors see it, some don't. And so for us, we're kind of sticking in Canada, and we've had some pushback with that and wanting us to bring part of our business to the US. And, I think as entrepreneurs, as individuals taking risks, we're open to anything if it makes sense and it is good for business. For us here in Canada or North America, they say about 70 million unpaid family caregivers in Canada and the US, but only 8 million are in Canada. So the market is much larger. So it is an inevitability for us to be moving over to the US. It's just a matter of, like Sydney was saying, when is it strategically valuable to do so? And we're not quite there yet, but we hope to be bringing offices to the US for sure.
That brings up an interesting point. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about tariffs and, cross-border problems. Now, Sydney, you're a hardware company, so you're actually shipping product. But Leo, you're more of a software company, so there's no physical property being shipped. Does that make a difference now with the current laws, or how do you understand that whole situation?
For me, compared to Sydney, it is a lot easier for sure. We've decided to stick with software to start. We are looking at robotics later on, but to start, we focused on software. So when I see tariffs, I'm less affected by them. I think it's more of the energy of trade. Like if the Canadian and American border and trade are not respected and have a positive view, then it just makes conversations a little bit more different for us. There isn't necessarily a cost component to that, which makes it a lot easier. When I know probably Sydney has more challenges with that than we do. But to use a millennial word of the vibe of trading is different. When tensions are tight, American customers are a little bit more worried or concerned. So it does affect our business.
It's interesting. I think that we're in a very unique place because, as you both have mentioned, we are a hardware component. We make a metal unit that sits underneath the prosthetic socket. So it's part of that prosthetic leg. And we are shipping product from Canada to the US. We do all of our manufacturing and quality assurance here in-house in Canada. We are also ordering parts from overseas. So there's a little bit of a dual movement happening where we're getting parts from overseas, we're using them here in Canada and then shipping them down to the States. So certainly something that we always have a finger on the pulse of. What is helpful for Vessl is that there is a certain protocol within tariffs between Canada and the United States called the Nairobi Protocol. And the Nairobi Protocol is specifically for products that are for folks with disabilities. You're exempt from tariffs. And I think that was put in place, most of medical is exempt, but then specifically this one is specifically for use by people living with disability. So we are exempt from all tariffs for that reason, which is a big advantage for us right now, given how things are moving. I would say the other thing, kind of to touch on what you were talking about, Leo, that divide between the countries, I think it also depends on the industry that you're in and what that relationship was like beforehand and what that relationship is like now. We have extremely positive interactions with folks in the United States. I was down in Florida last week and people are constantly asking how are things going? Sometimes apologizing for how things are. But I think specifically when we're talking about what space are you in, we're in the healthcare space, which hasn't exactly been supported by the current administration. And then we are for us, in that disability sector, which certainly is being overlooked or not treated with fairness in today's current climate. So I think everybody, regardless of whether you're from Canada or the US, and in my case, everyone in my industry is kind of like, we're in this together. And I've had really positive interactions with all of my American partners.
I was gonna ask that question because I think there's kind of the perception that you have that there's some kind of complications across the border. But when I talk to people from Canada all the time, I talk to people in all kinds of different companies that we're supposedly having problems with, and I find on a personal basis there's never that kind of context around it. Do you guys feel that as well?
I agree with that sentiment 100%, Jay. I think that there's a lot going on in the media and in the news, and that part is really loud. But I think on an individual basis, I haven't experienced anything negative.
Yeah, I'll be honest, maybe slightly a different energy about it, but I think, American and Canadians are open to just good solutions. So if you have a solid solution, then it breaks down all borders for sure.
That's a very good point. The idea should break through any kind of barrier we've got. And so let's get out of the political area, which I'm happy to do. And let's talk a little about regulatory now. Sydney, you've got a device, so you actually have to be approved Is that right? By Health Canada and the US? Did you go to one or the other first?
Yeah, to Leo's point earlier, I think the market in the United States is larger than the market in Canada. So we did focus there initially. We're still very much focused there. We applied for Health Canada. We are a class 1 medical device. So for Health Canada, it's a registration process. You basically go online and you register that you have a product, but there's not a delay between like registration and acceptance. You register and you get accepted once you pay your fee. Uh, and then in Canada, there is a bit of a delay. So we did apply a few months ago, and it's a bit of a couple month delay between when you register and then when you actually get approval. And so we're just waiting on that now. But again, class 1, so it's a much shorter time frame than it would be for a class 2 or class 3 device. And then we're also planning to expand into Europe in the next year and a half. And so that would be CE mark, again, class 1, but there's a little bit more involved for that more international scale. So we'll be assessing that in the coming months.
Well, there's plenty of market here in the United States. And unfortunately, as you've told me many times privately, it's a growing market, unfortunately. Obesity is rampant in the US, and hopefully we can get past that and get to more proactive measures. But I've got a question for you, Leo, because you don't have the FDA gate or guardrail that Sydney has, so you don't have the problem of getting approved or getting registered, but that kind of eliminates maybe a moat for you that you could build around your product. So how do you overcome that? I mean, let's get into the IP a little bit. Do you have any IP around Tugi Care, and what would you say your biggest moat is?
Well, I think there's still a lot of regulatory stuff for software that we have to be aware of. So there's still HIPAA and PIPEDA compliance that we have to hit. It's a little bit different. So you can do it before you're judged on it. So you can set everything up. And then once you're challenged, you have to have it ready. But unless you're challenged, no one really checks. So it's a bit of an odd situation. But I think compliance is key whenever we're working in the healthcare space, and making sure that when we're collecting data, when we're speaking to individuals using AI, it's a bit of Jay, what I used before is like entering into the jungle a little bit. There isn't a whole lot of pathways built before us to understand safety rails and what's working. So of course, for us, we do use a lot of the large language models on the market as a baseline. So OpenAI is our biggest partner in that realm. And so for us, it's how do we pull the information from a traditional chatbot or traditional LLM like OpenAI and ChatGPT to make sure that it's specifically customized. So what I always say is we've taken this large ocean of AI that can be quite hard to navigate, knowing how to prompt and, the weather and the tide and the change and, the information you get back. What we've done is we've fine-tuned it to a calm stream where caregivers and seniors can access AI support and AI innovation at a very calm, easy to understand and easy to use manner. And so that has become our moat, is how do we bring AI to caregivers that have never used AI before, or a senior who has never used any of these innovations before. And our direct path is not only that fine stream and that calm stream that we've built, but also our distribution partnerships as well. Because building a great product is one thing, having it pushed into the market through different distribution channels is a whole other animal. So for us, we have our distribution channels locked in. We're the first to be doing that, which is great, but also challenging. When you're the first, it's always great. It's exciting. Pat on the back. Wow, you're the first to ever do that. But then there's but wait, we've never done this before. Well, what's the path? How do we do this? Ooh, challenges, concerns, and then they start to arise. So no matter the moat in AI and software, you're getting a lot of pushback when you're innovative, which is exciting, but challenging because we just want to be able to deliver the best product we can. And sometimes those guardrails can make it difficult, but we understand the reason for them, because making sure that AI is reliable, safe, and privacy protected is number one.
I think, having seen a couple demos of Lane and the way it works, it is very easy. It's like you just fall into it. It's like having a conversation with somebody. It's not like you're going into that, creating a prompt. You're just talking to somebody,
Exactly.
somebody who's empathetic and really understands your situation and then can help you navigate those incredibly treacherous waters when you're trying to juggle too many things and you feel like you just want to give up sometimes. I know several people in that position, and when I talk to them, I just hear the desperation in their voice. So
Well, the hardest thing is knowing who to talk to and who to turn to for support. And so making it conversational, even in an individual's like, I don't feel good today. Like, you don't have to get into this huge prompt. You don't got to give it context. It's just, I don't feel good today. And Lane takes that and slowly opens you up to talk, to share, and to find a solution. So you don't necessarily need to be chatty or need to understand AI. You can literally just say, hey, hi, how's it going? And Lane slowly opens you up so that you can really start to get to the source of your concerns so that she can provide a solution.
So, Sydney, Leo touched on distribution, and I know you've been working very hard on creating distribution partnerships. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Leo said it really well. A lot of the innovative nature and the benefit that you can bring to the industry relies on if you can actually get the product into people's hands. And we're very grateful for the partnerships we've been able to set that up. So we've got a couple different partnerships. If folks are on LinkedIn, check us out next week because we'll be announcing the next couple of partnerships that we've got distribution wise next week. And those partners are a mix of true distributors and buying groups that represent a lot of clinics and kind of consolidate their own billing structure. And so it just gives us access to more of the market than we would be able to, or than I would be able to knock on doors and break down myself. This really opens those doors automatically for you. And so I think, and I'm not sure how Leo feels about it, but for distribution, at least for us, certainly involves a lot of work on your part still to nurture those relationships, to hold people accountable, to make sure that you're making the most use of it. I think from what I've heard, people can fall into the trap of, oh, well, I've signed up a distributor. My sales work is done now.
I'll let them take care of everything.
And I don't think that's exactly how it goes. So
No.
certainly the folks that we've been working with so far have been phenomenal partners, really engaged, really wanting to make this an impactful opportunity for us, asking questions about how they can best support, how they can work with us. So whether that's providing education to their teams so that they can speak about it in the best and most educated way possible, or actually riding along with some of their sales reps to the clinics that they visit and using those relationships to build our own as well and really help get the word out. I think both of those opportunities are important when you think about the distribution side of things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you got to nurture. You can't just sign a contract and, get a yay or yeah, we love it. Everybody loves it at first, right? And then, everyone's like, this is fantastic. And then crickets. And it's like, wait, I thought you loved it. Well, we do, but we're busy, right? And when you're dealing with innovation, it's not always their main priority. It's sometimes a nice to have. Right. And so how do you make a nice to have a priority? And that's like Sydney was saying, relationship building, constant touch points, making sure that they see the value instead of just, yeah, cool product, you're innovative, great. But what does that mean to what's in it for me is also a big part of that.
Well, and to build off that, Leo, I think, you and I are both in industries where the caregivers, the care team are overworked. Like these people are so busy. And so to say, hey, I've got this solution. It's actually going to save you time. They're interested, right? They're like, well, that's a no-brainer. We just need to teach you how to use it or teach you how to incorporate it or help you find the right patient. They're like, I don't even have the brain to get through my day. I do not have the time to then identify the right patient for this brand new thing that I have no experience doing. So exactly as you said, Leo, like helping to break down those barriers and make it as intuitive to use as possible, as easy to integrate into their current workflow, as simple to test out with a few people so that they can really see the value. I think that onus is on us to make that a positive and an easy experience.
Yeah, for sure.
I found in my past, as I built distribution channels for different companies, it was always the best partners are the ones you make it the easiest for. So if you can make it very easy, reduce the friction between them and their customer, then you're making their job a lot more facile and easier for them to really become an evangelist of your product. But as an investor, I'm not interested in nice to have things. And the reason that I'm interested in both of your companies is because they aren't just nice to have, they're need to have, because I know the pain, Leo, of a caregiver who's just so frazzled they can't think straight. And Sydney, I'm, not personally knowing people with an amputation, but At the same time, I can only imagine the discomfort they must feel when you told me the story about them putting on socks and taking off socks to kind of compensate for the changes over the course of the day. It almost brought tears to my eyes. So I think that's really important, as an entrepreneur. If you're looking for just let's build a better mousetrap, you're going to have a trouble finding investors. But if you're coming up with new, unique, innovative solutions that are needed in the market, that's the key. So, think about that when you're both wildly successful and you start investing in early stage companies yourself.
Absolutely.
Like that. I like that. Yeah, for sure.
So you've both got access to Canadian university talent pipelines. Is that a competitive advantage, or is it something that's just kind of nice to have access to?
Go ahead. I was gonna say I think what's happening, and especially where Sydney is in London, there's a lot of talent in these regions of Canada. Here in Southern Ontario and Toronto and London, Ontario, out west. I think Canada is a great place for talent these days. I think a lot of people used to think, oh, we got to go to Silicon Valley, we got to go to San Francisco, we got to go to LA where you are, Jay. We got to go to these places, New York, to get talent. And what's exciting is that, what we're seeing is there's actually a lot of talent here in Canada, and connecting it with, fresh out of university students that are hungry, that are eager, that want to learn and take action, I think is fantastic. Sydney can probably say the same, is that when you meet somebody that just has, skills, but no energy, no excitement, no curiosity, no willingness to take on challenge, talent can only go so far. And I think that's something that I really enjoy about young university students. They're fresh, they're hungry, they have that, animalistic, I just want to get out there, I just want to make it happen. And as entrepreneurs, we need that energy. We need it badly. So I'm excited about what's happening here in Canada in terms of talent. And I think connecting it to key universities is a great step. So I don't know, Sydney, if you've done any of that yourself, but we're open to it and we're looking to get started as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you said it really well, Leo. And we've hired lots of co-op students and interns through various programs. And as you said, Leo, like where we are in Southern Ontario, it's a densely populated region for a lot of different universities and colleges. But we've had co-op students apply from all across Canada. We've got a co-op student right now from Alberta. The next person that we hired is coming from British Columbia, literally the opposite side of the country from us. So I think coming back to what you were saying, Jay, as far as having a truly innovative product, that's attractive, obviously, for investors and obviously for customers, but that's attractive for employees. And especially as a student, as you were saying, Leo, like these people want that kind of experience. They want the responsibility to really put their skills to the test and learn new things. And you just don't get that kind of opportunity at a large company. Whereas for a startup or a small company, I don't have the time and attention to coddle you along and just give you really low level, boring tasks. Like I need you to get up to speed quick, and then I need you to own your tasks, and I need you to lead that side of things because that's on you now. And so really mentoring people so that they can take that on, obviously, but encouraging them to take on more leadership and have those experiences. We have been blown away by the hunger, the attitude that the co-op students have had that we've hired, again, from all across Canada. So I feel very optimistic about the talent that we've got access to here.
Leo, you have anything else to add about that? Because I have kind of a question. It seems to me like in the US there's this kind of bias these days. These young people, this new generation, they just don't have any enthusiasm. They just feel like, they're entitled or whatever. I find that, most of the young people I'm talking to are just the opposite. They're really go-getters. What do you guys see up in Canada?
Yeah, I think like I also work with youth and education, and I've seen it on that side. And now with AI and coding, it's changed dramatically. I see, obviously there's always the individuals in a generation that, are not as eager. But I think overall, the young people coming out of school right now have so many tools at their disposal, and they're learning these tools, and they're really maximizing what's possible with these tools. So I think before, back in the day, different generations would have to work harder to get what this generation can do in one day. It would take a week or months. So sometimes it's just a bias on that. Well, you didn't work that hard. Well, you did that in a day. You did that in a weekend. Yeah, I did. But the technology, the innovation I'm using to accomplish that is state of the art. And so that they're on that cuff of what's state of the art, what's working, what's not working, what vibe coding tools are there or not there, what different parameters within, the current tools sets that are available. So I think young people are coming in with a proper talent base with the tools that they have, where in the past they might have had to work harder technically to get to the same distance. And that kind of idea is lazy. Working 12 hours a day, what would be produced in 12 hours is dramatically different than what you can produce today in 12 hours. So with that in mind, I think the young people are really innovative and, are using these tools that maybe I would have not have used at their age. So it's exciting to see that they're hungry and learning, which I think right now is an important skill set to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Work smarter, not harder. Right? Like,
Yeah.
why put in more hours just for the sake of putting in more hours? Like, let's just do it more efficiently, which comes to the tools that you were saying, Leo. And I agree. I think that when you're raised in an environment where there's new tools popping up all the time and you constantly have to learn new tools, the fear of a new tool is just non-existent, right? They're like, oh, well, I would say we use this CRM or we use this inventory software or whatever. Do you have experience with that? No, but I've got experience with these 3 other tools and I taught myself this one in a weekend, so I'm sure I could figure it out. Like just like I'll just learn it then kind of attitude, which is really energizing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of fear. They're kind of just like, yeah, I'll take that on.
Yep.
I'll figure it out.
I've seen that.
I'll figure it out.
So let's take a quick shift. In the US, investors we have this thing called QSBSS, which is a tax tool that we can use as investors. We invest in a startup. We hold the stock for 5 years. If they follow certain programs and parameters, we get a big tax deduction. So it's incentivizing us to invest. Do you have anything like that in Canada? Are there any incentives for investors? Leo, you touched on it briefly. You said there's just not as much appetite for risk, maybe, or can you
Actually, it's the opposite. As far as I see it, the Canadian government actually punishes you for taking risks on companies and they have failed. Where in the US, there's a way to kind of get out of that situation. Where in Canada, you actually have to pay for it in your taxes, which makes investors go, they have to be truly, utterly, like 110% convinced, then they will. But, you're talking about like their retirement money. You're talking about investment portfolio. You're talking about their kids' education. They're going, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not willing to take that risk. Go to the government, get the non-dilutive grants, then come back to me. So I find that's what leads a lot of startups like us to go, okay, well, I'm going to go to the US where they're hungry and they're taking risks and they're like sometimes not even looking and just forging forward, where Canada's very deliberately cautious. And that makes it really hard for us as innovators and startup founders to do our job. And so I think that's what pulls a lot of us over to the US outside of, say, the size of the market. And so I know Sydney and I have both had conversations with, investors in the US, and just their eagerness to kind of take action and take a risk is inspiring because we don't get that here.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot less.
Exactly as you said. A lot less for sure. And it's just not the same no-brainer that it is when you have that kind of incentive. There is a group in Canada called the Council of Canadian Innovators, CCI. And I know that CCI is working really hard behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to try and really bring this conversation forward so that people realize the implications of these kinds of decisions and of these kinds of tax incentives so that we can be a little bit more thoughtful about how we can build that into the Canadian economy to try and incentivize some more of this growth. And I think that the Canadian government is focused in some areas on that, very focused on supporting manufacturing in Canada, supporting intellectual property in Canada. And this could be one of those areas where we recognize that we need more investor dollars in Canada. Here's one of those ways that we can incentivize that and encourage that to really grow the space locally.
One of the things we see in the United States is that there's an appetite for innovation in the capital markets. We're seeing an explosion in the secondaries market where you invest in a company and it gets financing, and it's growing and it's scaling and it's doing well, but there's no liquidity event because they're not going to go public and there's nobody to buy them. But now the secondaries market is opening up where people who are holding those private shares can sell a portion off to funds that are actually actively buying secondaries of companies. So, we've got that going on. We have the crowdfunding situation where you can actually have, blue collar people invest for the first time where they don't have to be accredited investors and they can invest a very small amount of their money, but they can take shots with some of these innovators. Do you see any of that kind of thing happening in Canada?
I just met a company doing more of the crowdfunding stuff in Canada, but I can't speak to the other part of it. I don't know if you've had experience with that, Leo.
Yeah, I would say not. I think crowdfunding is a great tool to get market exposure, to get right in front of the potential customers and also get support from them. But in terms of, that extra support, I don't see it. So again, it leads to, just people being more cautious. They triple check you. They give you a triple look. They might instinctually say, yes, this is great. What Sydney's working on is fantastic. But the risk for me is too high. So I'll take a step back, let the US take the lead on the early stage. And then once you're at Series A and you've proven it, then I'll take that risk. So that early stage, pre-seed, seed, and even some early Series A are like just not attractive. But I think, I think angel groups here in Canada are a little bit open. I think maybe Sydney, you have more experience with the angels than I do, but I think they're open to it. Again, it's the tax incentive. That they go, I'm going to get hit at the end of the year. Maybe not. And so there's just Jay, our job as entrepreneurs is to give you, the investor, no reason to say no. Your job is to find reasons to say no. So as an investor, right here in Canada, right away, it's like, well, it's going to be hard for me tax season. So there's my answer.
Yep.
Where we're like, but we're fantastic, but. And they're like, for that one reason and that one reason only, no, thank you. And so that hurts us for sure.
Sydney, anything?
Nothing to add. I think Leo summarized it really nicely.
Great. So we're getting down to the end of the webinar, and there's something that I'd like both of you to address, and that's if you think about yourself as you haven't started a company yet, but you're thinking about starting a company in Canada, what is the one thing you wish you had known before you started Vessl Prosthetics or Tugi Care about starting and building a company in Canada that you didn't know going in?
I don't know. Does something come to mind right away, Sydney?
You know what? It's a good question. I think it's harder for me, and I'll tell you why. I was doing a fellowship program in Canada. It was called the Medical Innovation Fellowship. And it was through that program that we shadowed the doctor at the diabetes clinic and discovered the problem that we wanted to fix. And it was 10 and a half months, this program. And the program was specifically designed for entrepreneurship. So it was modeled after Stanford's biodesign, brought together engineers, PhD scientists, and medical doctors to innovate within the medical space. And they basically taught you all about startups along the way. So I have a bit of a harder time thinking about it from the very beginning because I almost got a bit of a jump start right at the beginning, in the sense that we were warned right up front, you're going to have to go to the US for capital. The US has a larger market. You're probably going to have to start there, especially in the medical sector. And here are some of the grants and programs to help get you started once you've graduated from this program. And so I would say that those are the three pieces of information I was glad I had graduating from the fellowship program. I think it's just important when you're about to start a company to realize that it is going to be an uphill battle and that you are going to hear no constantly. And as long as you are aware of that, you can go, okay, if that's the norm, then we're good. And I'll keep forging ahead. I'll keep pushing. That was something that really allowed me to just keep bouncing back and keep pushing forward and stay resilient. It's like, oh, well, this is totally normal. And we could just really push through. And I think that resilience is really important in founders. So those would be the two pieces of information I was glad I had at the very beginning.
Oh, that's good. I think to add to that, I think jumping into accelerators and early stage kind of programs like that is a fantastic way to kind of figure that out and be surrounded around others in the same boat as you. I think one thing that, I take from the gaming entertainment side of things is get out, maybe a little bit less with Sydney, maybe, but maybe not, is get your product out dirty, ugly, and early is key. I think a lot of people as entrepreneurs, we want the right product, the right solution. We want to make sure it's rock solid. We want to make sure it looks good. We don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want it to break or do something wrong. No, that's the opposite. You got to get out early and break and be embarrassed. I think if you're not embarrassed a little bit by your first product, then you're too late, right? And I always say to my CTO, where we're constantly battling over premium to, is this a use case? Is this even going to be valuable? Well, let's make sure it's premium first. No, 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 no. We're going to be wasting all this time and energy and not knowing exactly what the customer wants. And sometimes it's scary to do that. But if you're doing that right away, then it sets the tone for the rest of your business instead of holding it off, holding it off. Okay, fine. I'll let it go. It's not perfect, but no, no, no. Make it a mindset that we're going to get out. We're going to get out early. We're going to test. We're going to try things out. We're going to build a group of testers or people that want it, that at least want or need this product, and work with them early instead of holding them off until we're ready and then they can come in and check. You got to do it early. And I think that is in any industry. It's the earlier you start, the earlier you put your product out, the better you are, where that really feels like the opposite you should do in your ego and yourself.
We have a great program here in the U.S. called iCore. It's funded by the SBA. And basically what it does is it takes entrepreneurs who think they have a great idea and they run them through almost like a boot camp where they make them talk to hundreds of potential customers and actually get answers right up front before they even start iterating. And I think
Right.
I think if I had, one thing I would tell somebody starting a company or thinking about starting is talk to your customer, find out what their needs are, because what you think in your mind could be completely different from what your potential customer is feeling. And don't just rely on one. Get a lot of different opinions, because you don't want to go down the wrong path simply because you relied on one person's opinion.
Yeah, I think like just to add to that, we were thinking of ways that our companion lane would respond to caregivers. And one positive thing that a lot of people say, have a great day. Hey, you have a great day. What we found with caregivers is they were like, how am I supposed to have a great day when I can't even have a good day? And so this statement of have a good day actually was a negative. And people are like, ew, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm going. And we were like, wait, what? And so just simple like that, right? You gotta put it in front of the customer and make sure that they're okay with it and they like it, instead of you just assuming, yeah, no, wait, what? No, no, no. We gotta ask the customer and like I said, putting it in front of them so that maybe they can catch things that you didn't even know to look for a catch, and they found it, which is another thing too.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because you said ask the customer, and it is, to your later point, sometimes you don't even know what to ask, right?
Yeah.
And so just having it in front of them so that they can tell you feedback on the product itself. You're like, I didn't even think that would be a good, bad, or otherwise thing. Thank you for your feedback. Now we can make a change.
Well, we've come to the end of our webinar, but I really appreciate both of you coming on. Shaq will be going ahead and putting contact information on some slides so we don't have to go through all of that. But I really appreciate your insights. I love what both of you are doing. I hope you're wildly successful. In fact, I'm sure you will be. And thanks for coming on.
Honor. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you so much, Jay. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah. Thank you, Sydney.
Thanks, everybody.
'Cause none of this would have been possible without Sydney.
Thank you, Leo.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks,
Take care.
Jay.